Okay, it's cold. Alright, something I want to chat about right now is just a quick thought I was having before, and has to do with whether or not, some people will sigh, video games are art. And I'm not going to get caught up in specifics. I know that TJ, in his recent answer video, said, just shrug the topic off, says, look, if you want to play your games and feel like you shooting people in the gut is evoking some kind of intelligent emotion or feeling that makes you relate to the world in an appreciable way, then go ahead, but you won't have any of it. First of all, with all due respect, I think that's a straw man. But I don't think it's, I don't pin any, dislike on TJ for making that one, because I think this issue has to do with how much people are involved with video games, and I know that TJ isn't as involved as the people that are hounding him with this video game as art thing. I'm going to go so far as to say that all games that were developed with, were designed, every game that was designed, I think, is art. And I'm not going to put it all on the same level, of course. I'm going to say that most not even video games, all games, most games are a kind of, most games are very primitive forms of art, not very powerful forms of art, or not very effective forms of art. Because, let's go back to my definition of art, and I've mentioned this in a couple of previous videos. I think that art is a work, whether it is a performance or a thing, something that's to be digested in some sort by someone else, that is designed to evoke an emotion or feeling in the participant or the viewer or the reader. And effective art is something that will be very effective at evoking these emotions and thoughts and intellectual points, maybe, that the artist had in mind, or if an artwork is strong and if it relates closely to the real world, it will carry across very real intellectual connections that he didn't even intend, because there's this kind of realness to the work that he or she made. Alright, so I'll continue this video later. Alright, so based on this definition, why am I saying that all games, or most games, are art? It's because, take a board game for example. I've made some board games in the past, some homemade board games, but people, when developing board games, intend that the participant that engages with them has fun. And this comes to something that I thought of before. People that have said that video games cannot be art I've heard, I know TJ might have said this, and or Roger Ebert might have said this, maybe both of them, that video games cannot be art because you can beat them, because you can win them. Okay. I'm not sure whether or not they mean that video games are made Now, something that I'd like to say is that video games are not made with the intent to be beaten. They are intended to instill a sense of enjoyment and fun in the person that interacts with it. So now that's where I think that where any game, any designed game, any game is meant. That's where I think that any game will can have my definition of art applied to them, because they are being designed with an emotion, a very basic emotion, to be experienced by the person that is participating in them. I guess I'll continue this video. Okay, so by my definition, any game will be able to be defined as being art on a very small scale, I guess, because a work of art that's only supposed to make you have a feeling of amusement is a very basic part, very crude. So I would say, a board game. A board game is a very crude. I guess most board games are very crude works of art. Now, I'd like to go one step further and say that there are some games that not only are they designed for the players, the participants, to have fun, but they're also designed to evoke an emotional response, or have some kind of theme that gives intended feelings to the players. And I would say that these are on the same level, I think, as I guess books without an intellectual message, books with a theme, or movies. Your typical Hollywood movie that doesn't really have any meaning to it. You don't really learn anything. Doesn't make you reflect on the world in any fruitful, philosophical or intellectual way, even in the slightest. Like Transformers or something like that. It's all it's meant to do, or more solid movies that are still not intellectual. Movies that are actually good, that you enjoy watching, but you admit that they're just popcorn movies. So like good popcorn movies are equivalent to this, and I say video games that have a kind of theme. Because I don't think board games can really fit into this category unless it's a really visual board game that can pass off a kind of neat design. Maybe Dungeons and Dragons, if you have the correct models, or if the story is engaging enough that you kind of like feel inside the experience. You feel that you're in like bustling town, or that's more, I'd say, kind of performance art, because the dungeon master needs to know what he's doing in order to bring the players into that experience. So I'd say I don't know, I guess I am saying something kind of out of the box there, kind of interesting or unexpected, that role-playing games, even board game role-playing games, are sort of participatory performance art. So back to video games. So we have these video games that are both fun, because otherwise people wouldn't play them. They evoke amusement. They intentionally evoke, maybe if it's a science fiction, they evoke the feelings of a science fiction environment or a fantasy environment. So these are this is your popcorn art. It's entertainment. It's interesting, kind of, it's escapist. However, on the level above that, I'd say few video games reach this level, and it would be really, really hard for a board game to reach this level, unless you had a kind of a very, very intelligent and philosophical author writing scenarios for, like, I don't know, a table RPG. But you know, why would he be doing that? Why isn't he just writing his own books? So I think you'd find this more so in video games, where really the story, you know, it's not just good because of the gameplay. You know, there is, and it's not only good because it's immersive and that it evokes, you know, the feeling of being in a certain kind of environment, having a setting or a theme. But even after having pulled you in, it keeps you there with issues. You know, just like any intelligent movie or any intelligent book does. There are a few games that do this, but you know, people that are very into video games will mention them. You know, I know a lot of people say that Metal Gear Solid is like that. And I would argue against someone who would say, oh no, Metal Gear Solid, you know, the game itself isn't art. It's really just because it's like two-thirds cinematics. So it's really just like a movie. The art form is really just a movie with gameplay spread in between. But, you know, I would disagree with that, because the way they bring you in, and I haven't played it myself, but I know that players talk about, you know, being engaged in the storyline while participating in the action. And they talk about being attached to characters because of certain interactions they've had in you know, in actual gameplay, and that you know, it's an interchange. The gameplay works together with the cinematic side, the storytelling side, to bring the player into the story. So I'm just gonna change hands. My hand's really cold. So yeah, so this higher level of video games, which I would say is more in line with most people's definition of an art form. You know, something that actually makes you reflect on the world. It kind of brings out intelligent themes. It makes you think. You know, this is really, I guess, what people would call fine art. And there are video games that do this. You cannot deny that unless you're so disconnected from the world of video games that you're not even aware that there are games that make people think, you know, through their story, through their characters, through the events, and through the connection that the player has to the situation, because they're actually simulating being there. And really, that kind of connection, that kind of ability to draw someone into a universe, into a story, into a narrative, has greater potential than cinema, I think, and than literature. It's just that it's very immature right now, and obviously the impediment that something that's in the way of video games really flourishing as an art form is the fact that they are marketed towards people that simply want to get away, they want to compete, they want to play multiplayer. But I think that there's an equivalency in both the world of literature and cinema, because the same thing can be found in cinema in the sense of, you know, the giant Hollywood special effects oriented popcorn movies that turn out to be meaningless disasters. And except you can have a video game that's meaningless, but it's still good because of the gameplay. But it's not good art. It is art. People are having fun. The developers designed it so that it would evoke amusement and enjoyment. But it's not a sophisticated and elite in the slightest work of art. So I think people in film need to get past the very easy appeasement of viewers' expectations. Explosions, cheesy lines, cool characters, but dimensionless characters. I really try to bring the art form of cinema somewhere higher. And right now, people that make video games need to put in greater effort to achieve that, because there is precedent for intelligent movies, and right now the precedent for intelligent video games is it's only starting to be set, because video games are not nearly as old as cinema, and people do expect movies to make them think much more than gamers expect games to make them think. So I'll admit that video games have more of a burden, I guess, market-wise, to make intelligent games. But the game makers that are very passionate, they do that. They do that because there are games that are like that. And in reference to literature, it's not so difficult. There is junk food literature. People will talk about things like Twilight, and I would say Harry Potter is well-written junk food literature. And I don't know, some people think it's badly written, but it's a matter of enjoyment and opinion and literary taste. But I guess I haven't talked about visual art. I think there's a special note to be had about visual art, because visual art tends to be very simplistic and very crude, in the same way that video games are, because people will accept that something is even fine art just because it's beautiful, just because it's aesthetically pleasing. And I think that's pretty curious, because the same kinds of people that say that are not willing to admit that a movie is good simply because it's visually interesting. You usually say that, oh well, it looked great, but it was crap. And I find that kind of curious, because the same standard isn't held for visual art. So I guess the subject of what makes good art and bad art is quite interesting and kind of confusing. But I don't know. This is my first video trying to tackle that directly. I'm gonna end it here. I'll make a second video when I have further thoughts. I know I'm gonna have further thoughts, things to add, but that's my first one. All right. I was kind of all over the place there, but these are raw ideas.